So, how are you guys doing this afternoon? Or evening?
Or morning.
Good.
Or morning? Then again, only American time zones count.
User joined your
What?
channel. User entered your channel.
So, before actually starting raid, I wanted to cover some things. It seems like a lot of people don't understand what they're doing in raid. They're just
User entered your channel.
waiting to be told what to do, and then they do it without actually understanding fully of what they're doing. So, for instance, what we have going on in initial engage. When Deimos calls stop to empower, he should not be having to call out fire fields at all. He also should not have to call out range pressure. So before an engage, when any commander stops to empower, the Necros, the Eldies, the Warriors, and the Guardians all have something to do. So obviously the Guardians, if you're playing Staff Greatsword, you empower when the commander empowers. Do not empower any other time, because if your staff number 4 is on cooldown, you're screwing your group out of heals and empowers later on. Secondly, warriors should have their sword in Warhorn ready. And Double D, can you like mute your mic until I'm done talking? Because I keep getting keep getting echo from you. LEs there should be one LE who drops a fire field on every stop and engage. Demo or any commander should never have to call that out. A fire should be placed when you stop to empower. So when you have your LE parties formed up, someone has to say fire 1. And so every LE knows that that person's job is to drop down a lava font right on the empower location. There should be
We
another.
actually started like a rotation for that, basically.
Well,
Like
yeah,
whoever's one of the lower end, whoever's not water 1 or water 2 usually goes fire.
User
So
entered your
one of the
channel.
later guys.
Yeah, what I want to do is cover like every class what their job is, so everyone else knows what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There should be another LE who should be static 1. In my opinion, there should be only one static on the enemy. That's it. Placing 2 statics is redundant and a waste of a static, because as soon as the static is dropped, the first impulse of Guardians is to pop their stability. So the second static will have no effect whatsoever. The entire melee train will be moving away from it like nothing's there. So hold on to statics for mid to late combat. So have one static initial engage. Necros. There's only one Necro online besides me, but honestly, Necros should be moving out with the LDs on initial engage. Necros should be dropping their chills on initial engage. Also, if you're capable of doing it, use your number 5 fear mark on engage as well to fear anybody into a static field. So therefore, they get feared and they stunned, and they'll be pulled away from the rest of their group. So try to use your fear mark as something to fear the enemy group into a static field. Another LE's job, like a third LE, their job should also be applying chills onto the enemy group. Because currently the new meta is to drop chills have a more potent effect than static fields on enemy engages. So make sure your chills are dropped efficiently. And it is better to drop a chill field instead of on the entire group. If you can aim for half the group, that'll be a better idea instead of the entire group. Because if you put on the entire group and the enemy's warriors, clear the conditions, everyone's conditions are cleared and they move on. But if half the group is chilled, then the warriors who are not chilled will typically not use their condi clears. And so the people who have chills behind them will still get chilled behind them and won't be able to get cleared off and keep moving. So it's a great way to split up the group into 2. It's the same way how static fields work. It's just to split up the enemy group. Make sure their first step into a fight is a stumble and not a leap. So to break it down, in the very first 5 seconds of an engage, there's a lot of things that need to be happening, and a commander should not have to call out for it. And I've noticed that in our previous engages, we've been doing this for months, it's not done 100% of the time. It's done maybe 3 out of the 4 times, or maybe half the time that a fire field is dropped. Necros are running out for chill fields and fear marks, and there's like 2 LDs running out for static fields because there's some sort of miscommunication there. But Deimos should only have to say stop and empower, and then everyone else should have their jobs done before Deimos actually moves out. So I want to make sure that everyone here understands that, prioritize your jobs over Deimos's calls. Because if Deimos or any other commander starts seeing you doing your job before he has to call it out, it allows the commander to spend more time concentrating on the enemy instead of having to concentrate on, calling out skills for us to use. Because if he has to call out for you to use your skill, you're essentially handicapping the commander, because he's spending too much time talking about you guys instead of talking about how to properly engage the enemy. So make sure you do your job before, anything is said, and prepare for your job as well. You guys have been fighting with it under the same commander for a long time, so you should be able to understand what is expected of you and what will be done and what should be done, and therefore you can predict and do it. And take initiative, step forward and do it yourself. Don't wait for someone else to tell you to do it. Because if you step up forward and do it yourself, other people can follow your lead. So I'm just talking, this entire rant is just about the first 5 seconds of the engage, where you guys really need to step it up and make sure that your job is done properly and every single time, and that requires us to stay coordinated and on tag. Any questions about the first 5 seconds of an engage? Or did you guys just fall asleep?
Oh, well, I think we're still here.
Alright, so moving on to the actual engage. So when Deimos calls in to move forward and to leap in, the job of the periphery is to scatter. Alright? Your job is not to follow the melee train whatsoever. So your job as a periphery is to move either left or right, not forward or backwards. Because the enemy train will be gearing to run towards you instead of running towards our own melee train. So make yourself scarce as much as possible. So before Deimos actually leaps into an enemy group, typically our LEs have it, down to pat about dropping their initial water on engage. So that's fine. There's nothing much to discuss right there. But our melee in general have a tough time, properly coordinating their leap. Now, Deimos typically doesn't have to call for leaps for you to leap in, because you guys have been following Deimos long enough to know when the opportune time is to leap. Like for instance, if you were a commander and you saw an enemy group, you have to think to yourselves would this be a opportune time to leap in and engage? 9 times out of 10, your judgment will be correct. That the group that Deimos wants to leap into and kill is the same group you would want to leap in and to kill. So think of it that way. Think of it from a point of view of the commander, instead of having to rely on anybody telling you when to leap. Because when you wait for someone to tell you to leap, you're usually 1 second behind, because you leap after they say it. Deimos has been trying harder to count down. Now, countdown is essentially a handicap. Typically, a commander doesn't need to count down. His followers should be ready enough to actually jump in and do their job. So instead of having to, wait for Deimos to count down and say leap, try to look at the enemy group and the commander's perspective and think about, this is where I would want to leap. So when Deimos actually calls for leap, you're there. There's no confusion whatsoever. LEs, you guys have your coordination set out, and I have full trust in you in trying to set out in this party who does what at what given time. But what really needs to be done is mid-combat statics, right? So when Deimos actually leaps into a fight, there should be two things that should happen. One, if you can properly place a lava front right before Deimos leaps in, he can get actually a fire shield as he leaps in, which is a really OP buff to have. Secondly, if an LD can place a static field on the enemy group that we're leaping into, it's a better chance for us to keep that enemy group confined to one location. Thirdly, when we're leaping in, warriors, your job is to flurry a mob. Find an enemy, flurry a mob. Guardians, if you're running hammer, your job is to also immobilize forward. It's preferable if you actually pick a target and immobilize instead of just spamming your skill when you run in, because that's not really helping anybody. Necros, your job is to pressure the melee train. Drop your marks on the melee train. Keep those condis going. Because as long as those condis keep going, you're forcing them to clear the conditions as you're moving on. The more utilities that you can keep on cooldown for the enemy melee, the better chance we have for winning. And also wait for, we have, as a Necro, you have the best perspective of the battlefield, and therefore you can understand where Deimos is actually trying to claw into the enemy group. You can actually see him cleaving towards the enemy, and you can understand where he wants the wells to be dropped. So your wells should be actually picked, selected, and targeted over Deimos. So right when he calls for wells, you drop it that second. There's no hesitation whatsoever. You don't have to, select your skill or anything like that and move your cursor to Deimos and then drop it, and wasting precious seconds. So your well should be on Deimos because you should understand where the best place is to drop those wells. Now Deimos doesn't have to call out for any of this whatsoever. When Deimos leaps in, warriors, your job is to flurry and mob. It should not have to called out at all. LDs, it should not have to be called out for waters to be dropped or statics to be dropped or lava front to be dropped. Necros, it should not have to be called out that your mark should be dropped to keep the conditions up. But when he calls for bombs, wait for that bomb call to happen. So we can have better coordination about what's going on. And so when if any LD is doing a meteor NATO, it can coincide with the well timer as well. So when I call out for well timers to be ready in like 5 seconds, then the meteor NATO would also be ready approximately at that same time. So Deimos knows the perfect time for the next, big bomb that we can do. So that's like the next 5 seconds of the engage, right? So the first 5 seconds is preparation for battle, and the next 5 seconds is the actual first engage of the battle. And none of this stuff should ever have to be called out, ever. This is your job. You do it every single time, no excuses. There should be no excuse of, you having player lag or anything like that, because everybody has player lag. That is an illegitimate excuse for any situation whatsoever. So make sure that you work around that lag. You prepare for that lag, anticipate that lag, and adapt to the lag, because everyone is suffering from it. Don't use an excuse to not do your job. So is there any questions about the next 5 seconds of the engage?
I just don't completely agree with the not with targeting somebody when you're using the hammer mob.
Well, not targeting,
When you're
but
running
at least aiming at somebody, because what I see is as a Necro, I get a good perspective of everything,
User entered your
and
channel.
I hear a lot of Guardians with their hammers out, and they call out immob, and they have nothing in front of them. So make sure you're aiming at something, make sure you're actually
User
going to
entered your
hit
channel.
somebody instead of just saying the word immob and TS, so you can personally say, yeah, my job's done. So make sure you're paying attention to what's in front of you, and that immob has 1200 range. So you can get things pretty far away. Now I don't mean to try to degrade or call anybody out personally. This is everyone's job, and everyone needs to do it 100% time, 100% of the time, perfectly. And this is basic. I mean, this is like the most fundamental things to do in every engage, and it's not being done in every engage. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Nuke, Deimos, anything else to add?
No.
User entered your channel.
Alright, so I also was recording the first 10-second rant of a fight. So if people weren't here, I'll be posting that sooner or later, so people who are not here can listen in. I'm hoping that later on I can do rants about, more later on in fights, because our initial engage is very, very good. Our initial bomb is fantastic.
User disconnected
It's just
from
that
your channel.
the longer the fight lasts, the more we fall apart. And so we need to get, our shit together. That way 30 seconds to a minute into a fight, we're not falling apart. But the first 10 seconds should be executed perfectly every single time.